Hello, fellow fantasy sports fans. Welcome to MFSN, the Hub's fantasy football strategy show, every Thursday at 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. I'm Dr. Dan Ratner, and I'm here as always with Kasey, Vlad to the Bone, Scheinvold.
How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing well. No Ross the Boss today.
Not today.
He was indisposed. We never know what Ross is doing when he's off somewhere else. Who knows? Maybe Ross is a superhero. It's possible.
I think he could be.
He could be. We're going to think of superhero names as the show goes. But I did want to say we were off last week, of course, because of Thanksgiving. We're on for the foreseeable future. We probably will be off during the holidays. We'll make an announcement about that. But mostly we're here, and we're going to ride out this football season with you. So what week are we in now for fantasy?
I think we're week 13,
right?
aren't we?
Or week 13. So we're getting really close to the end of the season for a lot of leagues, the end of the regular season. We're about to get into the playoffs. So many leagues have their trade deadline has already come and gone. We'll still talk trades though, because some haven't. And besides,
it's fun to talk trades no matter what.
Exactly. But we'll also talk waiver wire, who to be looking for there. We're going to talk about the big news of this past weekend. As always, I highlight this every time, especially in fantasy football. This is a sport that morphs every week. You come back the next week and you're like, I didn't realize Josh Jacobs was the best running back in football.
Right. Or
but
you
right
recommend
now, it looks
Juwan Johnson as a priority pickup and he gets 0 points.
Yep. It can happen, especially at the tight end spot. It can happen.
I'm going to double down on him again this week, though, just because I'm going to take the blackjack approach. You know, you lose a $10 bet, you put 20 down the next time and 40.
Just keep doing that.
Hopefully you'll break even eventually. Right.
Okay. All right. Well, I like it. So let's talk about the key headlines that we see happening either from this past weekend or from the week upcoming. Let's start with this past weekend. What were the biggest things that happened that you saw? Just give me a couple and we'll go from there.
Well, I think, I mean, Josh Jacobs, 300 total yards from scrimmage in a game was pretty darn impressive with a couple touchdowns. And I think the other big one is probably Aaron Rodgers and whether he's going to play any more this season, because apparently there's been talk about letting him sit out for the rest of the season and seeing what they have in Jordan Love, or is it Bryce Love or Jordan Love?
Jordan Love. Jordan Love. But the Packers have a real conundrum. I read an article on this and totally agreed with it. They've got a conundrum. And I'm just going to say hi to Albert Mariquin has joined us here. He says, good afternoon. Albert, great to see you.
Good to see you again.
Bring your questions as needed. We're here. So the Packers do have this dilemma. Jordan Love hasn't played in a long time. His 5th-year option, I believe, is coming up soon. They need to make a decision about that. But to sit Aaron Rodgers against his will makes a problem there. And so,
especially when they're giving him like $45 million a year guaranteed or whatever the contract is.
Yeah. So let me ask you, what would you do if let's say you are the head of the Green Bay Brain Trust, and then we'll get to K-Money's question in a second.
If I was the Packers Brain Trust,
yeah,
I would bench him for the rest of the season and see if I can get anybody to take his contract for the next 2 years.
I totally agree. And here's
you need to move on.
Well, not only that, but like you can't live afraid of your employee.
Well, and here's that, and also like my biggest frustration with being a Giants fan for years, until about 4 years ago, then it changed, was we always pick somewhere between like pick 13 and pick 18 because you're always a middling team. Aaron Rodgers is a good enough quarterback to take subpar talent and make them 8-8. Well, are there 16 games? 8-8, 9-7, 7-9, which is never.
No, now there's 17 games, aren't there?
Oh, now there's 17. Okay, so 10-7, 9-8. That's always going to keep you somewhere in the middle, and that doesn't let you get the draft capital to find the next Aaron Rodgers, so to speak.
Let's jump back to this in a second. I'm going to take this question. K-Money says, Pittman and Mike Evans for Waddle and the Eagles D. What side is better? Now, I will put the caveat out there, first of all. It depends on your team, of course. It depends on the context of the league.
The answer to everything in psychology.
It is. And in fantasy sports, actually. In everything. But, just looking at the deal, what do you think? Pittman, Mike Evans for Waddle, and obviously an excellent defense, but still, you're trading for a defense.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think Waddle is probably the highest upside receiver of the three. in a keeper format or dynasty format. I don't know how much I like him better than Michael Pittman to me is, with Matt Ryan at quarterback, Michael Pittman becomes an 8-yard possession receiver. And unless they're
Big
deep in the
down.
red zone, I don't think he's going to give you much. Mike Evans is a touchdown machine. I don't know how many he has this year. It might not be that much, but I think he's gone for over 1,000 yards every single year of his career. Waddle is the number 2 receiver in what is the best receiver tandem in football. The Eagles D is a great defense, but I tend to be a defense streamer guy. So
Yeah,
unless Waddle is exponentially better than Mike Evans, I would probably have sided with the 2 wide receiver team.
I agree. I think if you've got that kind of depth, you can probably find a better trade out there. I love Waddle. I think upgrading to Waddle, that sounds great. And it's not a bad trade, by the way. I think you're getting an upgrade and something valuable. That's the kind of trade that I do look for. I just don't know if it's enough of an upgrade from Mike Evans to Waddle to really make it worth it.
Tampa Bay hasn't looked good. So if you're going on the fact that you're worried that Tampa Bay's offense is stagnant, and also Indianapolis's offense is stagnant, then it's probably a smart trade. I mean, Waddle is better than anybody you could have gotten off the waiver wire, that's for sure. And so in that respect, it's an upgrade. And look, if you are secure in the playoffs and your team is set for the playoffs and you just want to increase the power of your starters, and those 2 are just depth pieces, or your number 2, Mike Evans is your number 2 and Michael Pittman is a bench rider, and
then you pull the trigger, I think.
Then Jalen Waddle's worth it, because you're at the point of the season where you don't need your depth anymore. So that's why you built the depth all season long. So in that respect, if that's the situation, then I think you made the right trade, because honestly, the Eagles are going to play the Giants at the end of the season. They're going to play, I think, the Redskins again at the end of the season. So their defense might have a great schedule. It just might.
It's a great point. Keep going.
No. And so that's where you started this answer with, it depends, right? Now, if you needed if you don't have a lot of depth and you made that trade, or you're fighting for a playoff spot and you made that trade, then I would be more worried about it.
It's a really important point to recognize that what you're looking for at different points in the season is different. By the way, I want to say hi to Just Bob. Good to see you. Thanks for coming back, my friend. We'll get to Albert Mariquin's question in 1 second, but I do want to say, really, things change over the course of the season. At the beginning of the season, you want to build up depth, and then you want to use it to get through the bye weeks. Once you're through those bye weeks, you want to upgrade to the best starting team you can get.
Yeah, I mean, let's say in one of my leagues where I'm already in the playoffs, it's a 2 quarterback league, but my 3 quarterbacks are Jalen Hurts, Justin Fields, and Tua. So I have 3 top 6, top 7 quarterbacks this year in fantasy, and I'm already in the playoffs. But let's say I need an upgrade at wide receiver. There is no fair trade upgrade from Jalen Hurts or Justin Fields, if he's healthy right now, in a wide receiver. I'm not going to get Tyreek Hill. I'm not going to get Devontae Adams. I'm not going to get those guys, Justin Jefferson. But let's say I need a wide receiver. Maybe it's worth me overpaying to get the next best kind of wide receiver on the board for my team, because I still have 2 quarterbacks going into the playoffs for my super flex. And I've just really helped my roster as far as who my starting wide receivers are.
I love it. Don't be afraid to overpay, especially at this time of year. Meanwhile, in terms of trading away some depth, go ahead and trade away some depth and then pick up your handcuffs. Make sure you've got your handcuffs at this point in the season. All right, and we're going to get to some questions. We'll get back to strategy. Albert Mariquin asked this. Pick 2, half PPR. Chris Olave, Christian Kirk, Christian Watson. A lot of Chris's in there. That's right. I'm going Chris Olave and Christian Watson. What are you doing?
Wow. I am going Chris Olave and Christian Kirk. And here's
sorry. Half PPR. Go ahead. You said
here's my thinking. Christian Watson, we don't know who's throwing the ball to him yet.
Yeah.
That always scares me. Christian Kirk is going up against the Detroit Lions. And the Detroit Lions have given up passing yards and receptions to wide receivers all season long. And Zay Jones had a great week last week. And people could say the trend is moving for Zay Jones to be the number 1. I would also like to think that Zay Jones being that strong means all the focus can't be on Christian Kirk, who has proven that when you put him in the slot and there's not a bracket coverage or double team, he can catch 7-8 balls a game and put up some big numbers. And Detroit is the defense to do that against. So that's why I would pick him.
No, I
over
changed
Christian
my mind.
Watson.
Also, I wasn't factoring in the PPR component as well. I mean, even when Christian Watson was having these big games, he's not a PPR guy. And if you factor in that Aaron Rodgers could be playing injured or not playing at all, I think you go Chris Olave and Christian Kirk. Thanks for setting me right on that. All right, Just Bob says DeAndre Swift, my favorite, big week this week. Hot take. Okay, what do you think, Case?
I just like DeAndre Swift coming up because we have such.
You want me to go?
I know where you're going. Hey, if he's healthy, we know how good he can be. The problem is, he's not always swift, and sometimes he gets hurt. And Jamal Williams is such a capable second running back in the backfield that unless Swift starts the game super hot, he's not. I don't see him getting all the work. But hey, the guy's a great. Look what he did at Georgia in college, and how good he's been when he's healthy. And it's Jacksonville. Jacksonville's not a great defense, so it's a hot take. I don't know if it's going to be a big game, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he ends up with close to 100 total yards and a touchdown.
I'm totally comfortable playing him, but and I'm also comfortable saying, yeah, he could have a big week. He could have a dud because Jamal Williams is always there taking things away. And this is the reason I didn't want to draft him in the first place. He's way too injury prone. He just is, he's out all the time. And I don't mean that as a criticism. I mean, this is a tough game. These athletes can get really dinged up. It's a really tough sport. So I don't mean it critically of him, but just when I see the track record, I'm always a track record kind of guy. And this is why I love baseball. We'll get to that when we get to the baseball season, but I love the track record, even though baseball is failing us in that way too. Track records seem to be not something you can track as well.
When I was, when I used to listen to ESPN radio in the morning, driving into my kids to school a few years back, and Mike Greenberg and Mike, who was the
Greenberg and why am I
Golick?
Golick.
And Golick used to always say the best ability for a football player is availability.
Right.
And DeAndre Swift too often hasn't been available. He's healthy going into this week. So Just Bob may be absolutely right, but it's also just as likely that he turns his ankle on his third carry and is out the rest of the
I will say this. I love discussions that revolve around hot takes because they're fun. Yes, let's talk about these things. I love the prediction. I see you have a further statement on that, Just Bob. We're going to get to Carlo first here, and then I'll get to you. Carlo Camisano says, I know this isn't a dynasty stream. Actually, we love dynasty, so this is great.
Yeah, this
but Ramondre for a late 2024 first, and he'd be getting the first.
Wow. Who are I guess it depends. Can he tell us who his other running backs are? Because Ramondre is a young, really good running back. I know it's not comfortable with him being in Bill Belichick's offense, but I mean, what would you be targeting with that draft pick late in the first? I guess that's what it boils down to. If you think one of those top three quarterbacks are going to be available there and it's a super flex league, then yeah, I would probably pull the trigger, especially if I have two other good running backs. But as we've talked about every week and already today, running backs get hurt so often. I don't think you can have enough depth of young, good running backs, especially in dynasty. And so I would have a hard time trading Ramondre Stevenson for a late first.
Okay. And I have a slightly different take, but related. I have a different take in dynasty. I'm not worried about running backs. I want to sell them and sell them and sell them.
Oh,
because they go out of style very fast. They're a commodity that runs out of juice quickly and loses all of their value. So I want to cash out on those and I want to bring in cheap running backs.
Yeah.
The problem that I have with this deal is the late 2024. First of all, it's a late round pick. Secondly, you're waiting another year. That's okay.
Oh yeah, I didn't even put that together. Thanks for pointing that out. 2024.
Yeah, I don't think I would do it.
That's a weird question then. How do you know it's going to be a late 2024 first?
Well, in dynasty, sometimes this team is just going nowhere, right?
Yeah. They're just stacked because that means they're rebuilding. Stacked. Well, no, then it would be an early 2020.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, because they're stacked. Right. Exactly. So, what what I think you want to do there is, first of all, I would push for a 2023 pick because you have much more predictability. You can see what's out in front of you. 2024, a lot of things can change.
He
And I
said,
just,
my league is very weirdly composed.
okay.
Now I'm just curious.
Yeah. Well, we should find out more about this. Let's see. Carlos made a couple of comments though. He said fade Watson this week, by the way. That's not a different topic. Then he says, depends who your other options are. But that may have been in reference to something else. Give me one sec.
Yeah, he was commenting on Just Bob's talk about the running backs. Henry, Etienne, Pierce, Swift.
Okay, so let's bring up Just Bob's questions here. First of all, this is a response to DeAndre Swift. First, Just Bob says, I'm taking him off my bench this week. I really feel he's going to have a game this week. I think when you've got a feeling, go for it. You know, you're going to get it wrong sometimes. But to me, the worst feeling is you had a feeling, you didn't go with it,
and the person went off. Yeah. Especially with Etienne was banged up last week. I think he's absolutely, Etienne's probably a better play than Swift when both are healthy. Especially considering what other running backs have done. It's Detroit. I mean, you're going against Detroit, for crying out loud. And Pierce is just not in the consideration. I think he's
not anymore.
A distant 4 right now in that group. Henry is always playing, but he does have a tough matchup. The Eagles defense is pretty stout.
I think you start Henry every time.
You have to start him. You know, but I wouldn't be surprised if Swift does go off like your hot take that Etienne and Swift both have higher totals than Henry this week.
I think that's possible, but I think you got to start Henry. I think if Etienne's starting, you got to go with him. I agree. Pierce is an interesting player from a dynasty perspective. I do think he's on the way up. I think he's a pretty valuable commodity, actually. But and some people were surprised by that. But you can't.
Houston just changed changed quarterbacks.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of problems with it, but he's also just been putting up goose eggs. So Swift, I feel totally comfortable playing though, especially if Etienne's not clearly healthy. All right, let's get back. Let's see. My league is very weirdly composed. We're gonna get back to this question about dynasty. Okay. Carlos says, my team is good, but I punted the running back position. I think that's good because you can always deal for them too. I mean, look at the deal you're potentially getting for Ramondre Stevenson. Flip it around and know that you can get a player like that for your late 2024. When you get there, buy running backs for cheap. That's my take.
So he has 5 top 20 picks this year and next year. He said, Ramondre is my best running back by far. My second best are Pollard and Montgomery. I'm going to argue you there. I think Pollard is as good as Ramondre Stevenson and might actually have a higher upside than Ramondre. So I wouldn't say that Ramondre is by far your best. Knowing that you have that and all those picks, now I might pull the trigger because the other thing you can do is, wow, this quarterback or this person I really wanted is sliding in the draft. I can trade one of my 10 picks or 3 of my 10 picks to get that guy and still have 7 other picks during the draft next year. So in that case, it's not a bad idea.
Yeah. I mean, I will say this though, if let's say you're getting a late 2024, like you said, who are you hoping to get there? I mean, if you're looking to draft a running back and have him emerge, you already have that. So I don't think you deal him if that's what you're going for. Ramondre is a player that I want on a team if I'm ready to compete in Dynasty. If I'm not ready to compete in Dynasty, yeah, I'll deal him, but I'll still probably look for a different deal than that.
Yeah.
Who knows? You could even get maybe a second round pick from the same team.
Well, that's what he said. If you look 2 comments down, you can.
Oh, okay. Hold on. Let's see. Tried to get the 2-1 and 2-2 this year in a 10-man for Ramondre, but he doesn't want to make the deal. I still don't. I mean, that's a pretty good deal. I probably would take that one, but it's close.
And then he said he has Hurts and Kyler, so QB isn't really a problem. Is this? I'm assuming then it's a standard league, not a super flex league.
Yeah, well, I mean, if it's a super flex league, he's in pretty good shape there, isn't he?
Well, no, I'm not a big Kyler fan right now. I don't think I would.
Want to get who is right now, but
right.
But even so, in a super flex league, to have Kyler as your second is not bad. It's just a lot worse than it was.
Yeah, and I don't know who his third is.
Let's jump back for a sec because Just Bob had more commentary on DeAndre Swift. I don't have to play him. I feel he's going to go off this week. And plus, I'm locked in at second. So let's talk about this. This is another key part of strategy right now. You know, Kasey, in our MFSN league, you
beat me this week.
I did. I beat you this
Ugh,
week.
I was undefeated.
Undefeated. And yet it's funny when if you look at the point spreads, it's totally crazy. I don't know how you're good, don't get me wrong, but for you to be undefeated and me to have the record I have when we have pretty similar spreads even and total points, it's pretty interesting. But, if you are locked in to first or second, you have a bye. The key to me is getting the bye. If you can
Yeah.
get the bye, you don't have to play. I mean, any week you do not have to play, you cannot lose. And that's huge in fantasy football because in fantasy football, you can lose virtually any time. Carlo, meanwhile, says it is a 2 QB league. Let's see. He says, me neither, trying to trade him.
Probably talking about Kyler because I said I'm not
That's
a huge
Kyler, right. Okay. Carlo said, don't remind me. I believe he's talking to you, Kasey, about reminding him about Kyler. Kyler's really been very disappointing. Why don't we talk a little bit about this? Let's talk about disappointing players versus ones that have really surprised. And let's head it up with the ones that have really surprised because Josh Jacobs, this one kind of cracks me up because he was a sleeper for many people because he just
2
isn't
years
getting
ago.
well. And even this year, I mean, even this year, some people were saying, listen, don't sleep on Josh Jacobs because he has a valuable spot in a good offense. And meanwhile, he's only 24.
Yeah.
It's because he came into the league so young. I think people just think he's starting to fade. Running backs do fade very fast. And Jack Carlos says, Josh Jacobs going to make me cry. I'm sorry, Carlo. I'm not laughing at you. I hope I'm laughing with you.
That's right.
But, I want to hear why he's going to make you cry. Also, let's talk
Must
about
be one of the many he traded.
It could be. But and in Dynasty, that's the other thing is like, what would you get if you dealt Josh Jacobs versus Ramondre? So think about that.
He played against him this past week. So, yeah, that made you cry. I get that.
All teams that face Josh Jacobs this week are hurting.
Cried.
It's tough. Do you think so? Are the Raiders going to pay Josh Jacobs? What do you think is going to happen, Case?
I don't think they're gonna. Again, for the same
either.
reason you said you would trade Ramondre Stevenson. I think that the Raiders said, we're not in a position enough to compete right now, especially in the AFC West, where you have Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes. You have like such a tough division that spending however much it's going to cost you to pay him $25 million a year, whatever it is a waste of their salary cap until they're ready to compete. We've seen in today's NFL, unless you're in a good financial position and ready to compete, paying the most money to your running back is not helpful for your team and for building a franchise.
No, and listen, next year he will be 25. There's only a couple of years left on that tread, probably for him to be really good. So,
yeah,
then the question would be, where does he go? We'll jump back to surprises and disappointments in a second. But Francesco Gentile has a question here: should I trade Debo for James Conner? Okay, so this is definitely one where I would want to see the roster.
Yeah,
what is your
if it's a PPR league?
Yep,
and it's a PPR.
And of course, I'm assuming it's a standard league, a redraft league. Sorry, not standard because it could be PPR, but I'm assuming it is a redraft league.
Yeah,
so
my reflexive response is no, I would not trade Debo for James Conner, but I don't, but that's not knowing what your roster looks like or what the league rules are.
It's not a ridiculous trade in a redraft league, but it's not one I'd probably lean towards if I can avoid it because there's so much more risk.
If you're guaranteed the playoffs again, and you just need a running back and you have a ton of wide receivers, it makes sense. If you're fighting for the playoffs, trading for a guy who has a bye this week when there's only like 3 weeks left in the season, because Arizona's on a bye this week, is really, really just hamstringing yourself when you're looking for a playoff spot.
Yeah. So I think it depends on your positioning. I also think it depends on not only your roster, but like I vastly prefer Debo to James Conner, but James Conner, he's a really good running back. So I could certainly see it. Now, here's an interesting comment about it. Carlos says Connor's schedule is tough rest of season. So, Case, how much do you factor in their schedule the rest of the season? I bet you my answer is going to surprise you, but I want to hear you.
I consider it if I'm looking at trades, just because I consider the opponent they're going up against every week when I set my lineup. If But if he's clearly going to be my number 2 running back, regardless of the rest of the strength of schedule, because my second running back is somebody who's just not performing, like Antonio Gibson or AJ Dillon or something, then I don't consider it. Then it doesn't matter to me.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I try not to think about schedule too much, and here's why. I don't want to overthink the little things and then pay because of it. There's so many times where you think, "Oh my god, this game's going to go this way. This game script's going to go this way." The NFL is just not like that. Teams match up so differently, coaches scheme in different ways against different teams. Game script can get away. I, it's a tiebreaker maybe, but
Yeah,
it's
I
not
think
something
if
that I
it's
would
close,
factor
I
in.
look at it, but no, just considering, off the top of my head, I probably wouldn't pull that trade. I think could I get a better running back for Debo? I don't know. But if I do have depth where Debo is expendable, maybe Debo and somebody else could get me a better running back.
Francesco, maybe you can tell us what your roster looks like, and that could help us with understanding how to think about this. Also, have you explored other options? Sometimes people get locked in on one particular player for some reason, or
Yeah.
sometimes they get locked into dealing with one particular team. This can happen very often, by the way. If you're in a league where, let's say, only one or two guys is really responsive, I try to
Hey,
avoid leagues like that because it drives
if
me
you have a
crazy.
first round pick, you can probably get Ramondre Stevenson from Carlo.
Yeah, especially if you're in the same league. If you're
Yeah,
not in
that
the
would
same
help.
league, you probably can't. Let's see. Carlo says, I don't know. I feel like Connor isn't really that explosive of a back. He's getting 85% snap share and not doing much with it. A little touchdown dependent. I agree. He's also an injury risk.
Yeah, I mean, he's another one who hasn't exactly been a beacon of health.
I mean, if you were saying like, let's think, what wide receiver would be more comparable than Debo? I think Debo's two up there, but I would say like, what if you're dealing? Why am I blanking on the Eagles receiver?
Devontae
Not
Smith.
Yes. If you wanted to deal Devontae Smith for James Conner, that to me feels like, yeah, go ahead and do it. I don't know what you think about that case.
Yeah, I mean that could work. I would look at let's see, who else?
You're thinking of wide receivers?
Tyler Lockett maybe would be, but
Yeah,
the
see,
the
that kind of deal I feel more comfortable with because you're taking on less risk to send off a player like that and get back a player like Connor.
well, Debo, the issue with Debo now is with the addition of CMC, it's a pretty crowded offensive specialist kind of
It is.
area for
It
you
is. So
got
he's
you got
downgraded some
CMC,
right now.
you got George Kittle, you got Brandon Ayuk, and you have Debo Samuel. And so the question is,
But look at this
um,
comment. This is a smart
yeah,
one.
I agree with that too. But I also think then you got to look into picking up Jordan Mason because they like two running backs and they don't want to use Debo open that they don't want Debo to carry the ball. I don't know how many carries he has this year, but it's exponentially less than last year. So I think like Mason is going to get 10 to 12 touches probably with Mitchell out for the year. But you're right. There's less mouths to feed with Mitchell being out for the year.
I mean, I'll also say this, it's a different San Francisco team when it looks like they can make a Super Bowl run. It's hilarious what happened with Jimmy Garoppolo. Here he is back again, and he just is
Well,
constantly winning.
that's going to be the biggest story of the offseason. He's a free agent. Do you pay if Garoppolo gets you to the Super Bowl? And look, I think the Eagles are a strong team. I think the Cowboys are playing great, even though I'm a Giants fan and I hate both of them. They're both two of the three strongest teams, but San Francisco's as good as either of them. If Garoppolo gets you to the Super Bowl and then he's a free agent, but you have Trey Lance, who you've committed the world to, what do you do?
Honestly, I think you sign him and you trade Trey Lance. That's what I would do because I think they've seen Trey Lance some, and I could be wrong about this. Talk about a hot take. I always thought Trey Lance was going to bust. I don't mean it as anything bad against him, but I felt that he was one of these guys who has the raw tools, but that takes a lot of development. I mean, to me, how different is Trey Lance from Malik Willis, as an example?
Yeah.
I don't think it's that different.
Albert Marquin pointed out that Debo missed practice today.
Yep.
And
And
I would have
and then
to
he
see
said, "I
why.
like Ayuk better than Debo rest of season." So that's interesting, Albert. And I don't think it's necessarily a bad call.
No, Ayuk has been great. And the end of last season, remember, like the last 5 weeks of last season, Ayuk was one of the best wide receivers in football. Maybe he's just a late season guy. I don't know. But he has good chemistry with Garoppolo, that's for sure.
And Carlo agrees on that, by the way. So, I mean, San Francisco is just a really interesting team right now. With having dealt for C-Mac, having Garoppolo take the reins and do so well, just being such a quality organization overall.
Yeah.
And
But
and that makes me think they're going to hand off to Debo less because they're going to protect him for a deep playoff run. That's what I would think about.
I mean, to get back to the question, I will say this. If Debo is kind of superfluous on your roster, somebody who's not going to be an every game player for you, and James Conner would be, then I think it's worth the trade.
Yeah.
You know, it's again, it goes back to the same comment I had earlier about whether you overpay for somebody. On the surface, you might be overpaying, but the way your roster is constructed, it might not be overpaying for you, especially in a redraft league. So,
okay, here's another hot topic of discussion.
oh,
Albert
yeah.
Marroquin brought it up. We certainly were going to bring up to Deshaun Watson at some point. I was going to say as a Browns fan, but that's kind of a misnomer. I'm not a Browns fan.
From a Cleveland native.
I'm a Cleveland native that used to root for the Browns. I can't stand him. Okay, Albert says, how do you guys think Deshaun Watson will do this week? I want to get your take before I say anything, Kasey.
Okay, I expect him to be rusty this week. I don't think he'll put up great numbers this week. I think they're going against the Texans, who have a terrible run defense. So I think it's going to be a Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt day anyway. You know, he might run one in or maybe throw a short pass into the end zone on one of those kind of like tight end flats or something like that. He wasn't good in the offseason. He wasn't good in the preseason when he was allowed to play. And now he hasn't played for 2 years. And it's been 3 months since he last kind of was able to practice fully and throw with his team. So I would expect this week not to be his statistical shining star. I still think Cleveland's going to win, but I would bet less than 200 yards passing, maybe a touchdown, maybe 25 to 30 yards rushing. And maybe a sneak in if he gets a 2 or 3 yard run around the goal line.
Okay, I'm predicting 220 yards with 1 passing touchdown, 2 interceptions, and a fumble. Because Deshaun Watson is going to have to get used to playing on the Browns. And not only does he have to get used to playing, he has to get used to playing on the Browns. He's going to get
Dan,
crushed
you are
from behind.
such a childhood Browns fan. It's crazy.
Well, not only that, but I'm a realist. I mean, this organization destroys quarterbacks. I mean, and listen, it should be said, we don't know what it's like for a quarterback to come in with this level of scrutiny on their contract, on what's happening. I mean, it's kind of crazy. Now, my take on it is I think Deshaun Watson actually was probably going to be fine with that. Just based on having watched him over the last 2 years handle things, it seems, I mean, look, imagine if that was me or you. We would be like curled up in a ball in the corner. We wouldn't be able to function. He just goes ahead and does it.
Yeah.
All right. Sports Video Library says, do you have an email? I want to send you a message about marketing your show and channel. I love that idea. Okay. You can send, what is our email, Kasey? What's the email to send it to? You know what? I'm going to ask our producer, Greg Romano, put that in the comments for us, Greg. We have a show to run here. This is an important question. I want to get the right answer. So we do have an email, but I just don't remember it offhand because I'm not the one who feels that.
At mfsn.tv or something, isn't it?
It should
MFSN,
be, yes.
the hub at mfsn.tv.
We're going to get that for you. Give me a second. Greg, can you get on that and get that?
I'll just post Dan's personal email on the.
You can do that. Just give him.
Let's give him Ross's. He's
all right.
Here.
We'll get back to you on that. Trey S says, "Evening, gents. Good to see you.
Good
Full
evening.
PPR. Juwan Johnson or Knox?
Oh,
I'm already starting Diggs and Bass. Add Knox, and that feels like relying a lot on one team during a Thursday night game. Thanks and good luck this week." I agree. I think Thursday night games are sloppy. I don't love starting against New England. Also, even though the Bills are great, Diggs and Bass, I love starting. But
yeah, those are great. But and Bass doesn't have any effect on the Knox. I mean, like your kicker doesn't make one of your receivers more or running backs more or less value, or tight ends. I'm sorry. Knox did let you down last week, Carlo. But guess what? Juwan Johnson did last week.
The goose egg. I
He
mean,
gave a goose
one
egg.
comfort is it's a tight end. So you're going
Right.
to get anywhere between
Yeah, I mean,
0 and 3 points.
look, the Saints are playing the Bucks on Monday night or Sunday night.
Mhm.
Andy Dalton is notoriously bad in primetime games. So I don't know if
This is something Ross loves to talk
and
about.
he loves to
Oh,
point
if
it out.
you
So
were
I
here.
feel like I have to do it for him. So does that mean he's never thrown a touchdown or can't complete 5 or 6 passes to one receiver? No, it doesn't mean that at all. I certainly wouldn't start Kamara this week against the Bucks, who have a great run defense, and the Saints offense is not very good, and Kamara hasn't been very good. But I'm leaning Juwan Johnson myself because one, as I said at the beginning of the show, I'm doubling down on my waiver wire pickup from last week, and I'm going to keep saying him every week until it works. And two, Knox is a lot like Juwan Johnson in that he'll have one really good week and then 3 or 4 bad weeks, and then one really good week, and you're like, woohoo, he's back, and you put him in your schedule, and then you're just disappointed again.
All right, let's get back to this email question because our producer, Greg, has gone missing. I don't know what's happening. However, you can just look us up on Instagram. I would find us on social media. You can find us on any of the major social medias and just message us, and we will get back to you for sure. I will still work on that email for you, but I wanted to make sure to get back to you in some capacity. All right. Let's see. Treyas then says also full PPR, start 2. Etienne, Jeff Wilson, Rashad White, or Lenny.
Well, I'm not starting Leonard Fournette. That's for sure.
But would you start Lenny? I'm kidding. Same person.
I would probably start. Ooh,
this is tough.
Yeah,
there we go. We got that. We got the email finally. The hub at mfsn.tv. Greg is the one who manages it, so he's the one who knows. But
shout out to you, Greg.
Thank you, Greg.
ETN is an absolute, I think, of those.
I
Jeff
agree.
Wilson is in a timeshare with Raheem Mostert. Is Mostert injured?
What are the matchups also? I mean, it's funny. I said I don't really think about matchups, but I do as a tiebreaker. So, between
Mostert's going up against San Francisco. So that means Wilkins is going up against San Francisco, and Mostert is questionable. He was limited at practice today.
Who's Tampa Bay playing?
Tampa Bay plays New Orleans. So I might go Rashad White.
I would go Rashad White. Partly game script. I really do think that Tampa Bay is going to be ahead in that game. They haven't been very predictable this year, though, have they? So who knows? But they're a defense that I'm comfortable starting this week.
Okay, you get to pronounce the next guy's name.
Oh, I can't wait. Thank you for leaving it to me. Sports Video Library, thank you. We look forward to getting in touch in that way. Appreciate it. All right. The next commenter comes from Leferger. Tib. That was fun. Guys, keep bringing the names like that. Do I trade Higgins for Mark Andrews? My other wide receivers are Olave, Mike Evans, Keenan Allen, and Terry McLaurin. This is a 2-flex league. And then you signed your name. Do you trade Higgins for Andrews?
You got to look at the next one too first.
Oh, thank you, Kasey. My current tight ends are ever garbage. Conklin. All right. So
I would trade for Mark Andrews.
I would.
I mean, he's that much better than the number 3 tight end that it out earns you the difference between Higgins and Olave or Evans. I think Higgins is probably your best wide receiver. And McLaurin has a bye in week 14, so that has to be taken into account too.
But Jamar Chase is coming back. So is Higgins going to be quite that good?
Right. Now they're going against the Chiefs this week. So they're going to, if game script goes the way everybody anticipates, there'll be plenty of football slung around. But I would do it because I think Mark Andrews, when 90% healthy, more or less 100% healthy, is that much better than the next tight end beneath him.
Carlo Camisano is weighing in as well. Yes, go get Andrews. I think that's the prevailing opinion. When you can get that top guy or a near top guy at a very rare position, because tight ends are so bad. Look at what we're talking about Juwan Johnson and Dawson Knox. You could get a goose egg from that. You're not going to get that from Mark Andrews. Go grab it.
Right.
Especially for a guy like
he's going to get 8 targets.
To me, T. Higgins, the difference between T. Higgins, Mike Evans, even Keenan Allen, if he stays healthy, there's not actually a big difference to me.
Yeah.
I would rather have Higgins than Keenan Allen. I'm not would you rather have him than Mike Evans? I'm actually not sure about that.
I would, just because right now Joe Burrow is doing a much better job of throwing the football than Tom Brady.
Yeah,
I mean,
that's true. Okay, Carlos has picked up Foster Moreau, and I was legitimately ecstatic. What's your
I
comment on?
agree. I
Yeah,
think he's probably the top tight end waiver wire pickup. So, um, I mean, look, outside of the top 2 or 3 tight ends, getting anybody who can give you 6 to 10 points every week is a win. And Foster Moreau's been doing that. So, yeah, I would be ecstatic about that too, especially if I didn't have Kelsey, Andrews, Kittle. Who else would you even throw in there?
yep. All right, Just Bob is commenting on the topic we were talking about before about Rashad White starting as our second pick with Etienne. Carlo Camasano agreed with us, but Just Bob said, "Be careful, Lenny is healthy this week."
And he might be, but even if he's healthy, it's a split backfield at this point because Rashad White, in my opinion, and from what I've read, has looked like the better and more explosive back. So even though Lenny is kind of the senior member of the backfield, he's still going to get 10 to 12 carries, which is what Jeff Wilson would get if Raheem Mostert would play. And I'd rather go up against New Orleans defense than San Francisco's.
Let me ask you this, though. So Carlos pointing out Wilson plays San Francisco, as we talked about. Does Wilson's knowledge of San Francisco help him in this game?
Yeah, but isn't that equally canceled out by San Francisco's knowledge of
Aha, good point.
of Wilson's tendencies when he gets like trapped behind the line of scrimmage or when he's going to cut back, when he cuts back? Like the
You know
amount
what?
of
I actually,
analytics is crazy.
I think that's actually it's not only a very good point, but I think that it's the other way around. I think it helps the San Francisco defense more than it helps Jeff Wilson.
Right.
It's not like
Because
Jeff Wilson
San Francisco defense tackles with maybe the best front 7 in football.
Yep. Carlos says nothing can help you against the San Francisco defense. I can't argue with it. It's really true.
It's like Shaquille O'Neal. There is
Carlo
no
then
answer
says,
for me.
Andrews had a bad game. I think he's a smash play rest of the season.
I agree.
Yeah. I mean, I think you always want to try to capitalize on just one bad game. But if you see somebody trending down for a long time, to me, I sold Najee Harris in a keeper league, and I'm not comfortable with the term sold, by the way. We need to address that. I traded him. There's no ownership or selling.
I upgraded.
That's messed up. And it really is. So I'm glad we're adjusting the language there, but I traded him and then he started to show signs of life. So I could have gotten that wrong. But a lot of times when I see a consistent downturn or a consistent upturn, I follow the consistency as best I can. It's not always easy to do. Here's another question about Watson. Joshua Chong Limasas wanted to know about Watson's first game. We did touch on this before, but we'll revisit it. Both Kasey and I look for him to be pretty rusty. Yeah. I also think Kasey pointed out the game script in the Texans game. I will say this though: there's no such thing as game script with the Browns. It's just always going to be crazy. The Browns are going to find a way to lose by 1 or something like that. I don't care anymore, which is great, but I do think that Watson's going to be quite rusty. It's interesting. I don't know this guy well enough to know, because I didn't follow him that closely when he was with the Texans. I don't know whether the added pressure is going to make him rise up more or fade. And this is pressure we've never really seen in a quarterback. He has an unprecedented contract that we've never heard of in an unprecedented situation on an unprecedentedly ridiculous team. All right. So I think I wouldn't want to start him if we were depending on winning, depending on your quarterback situation. Okay, Carlos says, Najee, I love seeing him do well, but I think he's a prisoner of the situation. Pittsburgh needs major work done on the O-line. It's interesting. I don't think any of us are very familiar with seeing the Steelers this bad in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I know.
They really have a lot of work to do. They've got, I think Pickens is a legitimate star in the making.
Yes.
I love that I have him in Dynasty, so I'm biased in that way, but you just see the kind of catches he makes. He's a star of the future for sure, and he's already basically arrived as a solid performer. Do you believe in Kenny Pickett?
I do.
I do too.
I think.
Do you remember me saying I did weeks ago?
Yeah, I didn't weeks ago. In fact, in our Dynasty League, I chose not to draft him at number 2 overall and went with Kenneth Walker, which I'm still okay with, but I needed quarterback help. And I didn't believe in him. But after seeing him these last few weeks, it looks to me like he's figuring it out. And if they can fix the O-line, like Carlos mentioned, they have with Deontay Johnson, Pat Freiermuth, and George Pickens, who, Dan, was your best pick, I think, in the Dynasty League. They have the makings of a pretty impressive offense.
They do. And meanwhile, you can fix the offensive line pretty well in the draft. There's certain positions that are harder to fix. I'm not saying they're going to do a perfect job, but they clearly have to address it. If I'm the Steelers, the first thing I'm going to do is go get 2 offensive linemen. And I think it's a great observation.
And the beauty is, if it's a guard or center, you don't even need to go in the first round to get that.
Yeah.
Tackles you need to take in the first round.
Exactly. Follow up to this. But that's an important point. You can bolster your line without the tackles potentially. But, I think they probably need to do some of both. I feel like people overestimated Najee after his high scoring in PPR last year. Truth is, he's not too explosive. He's much more of a power back. That can sometimes happen, that you see the stats and they can mislead you. And I think I find it helps to actually watch a lot of football, which is probably why I'm not doing as well lately. I haven't been watching as much, but when you see a player and they pass the eye test, or they show you, this guy looks like a power back more than, somebody who can get all these receiving yards, you can see a lot of what's happening. So that's interesting. We're going to find out a lot about Najee. I think in the next year and a half, we're going to know all we need to know about him. And meanwhile, the clock is ticking. When it comes to running backs, they get old so fast.
Yeah, and I agree with Carlos that he does look more like a power back, but as opposed to like a Derrick Henry type of power back, he's also a pass catcher, and that's what gave him so much value last year in the PPR leagues, is because he was catching passes like crazy. That's a talent you don't often see in a power back. That role tends to go to the smaller backs. Deuce Staley types of years gone by. To go way old, we can go to like Dave Meggett back in my Giants early days,
or all the way to Rocky Blyer.
There you go. Yeah,
we can go way back.
I like it.
Okay, we have a question coming in from Joshua Chong Limasa. He says, Pollard, Ayuk, Sutton, Pittman, or Lenny in my flex. I'll let you go first, Kasey.
My first reaction is Pollard, then Ayuk would be my 1-2 ranking. I mean, talk about disappointing.
I agree.
Fantasy. Russell Wilson is maybe the most disappointing player in fantasy this year. Pittman, that offense is not good, and Leonard Fournette's in a timeshare. So, and not in an explosive timeshare. Pollard's in a timeshare, yes, but he's still putting up I think he's averaging almost 14 points per game the last 5 weeks.
I agree with you. I saw this list and I saw Pollard, Ayuk, and then it fell off a cliff. And I don't mean that critically of the other players or of how your team's constructed, but I see the others as having such downside compared to those two. Between Pollard and Ayuk, I don't know. Who do you go through? Who do you go for if you have to pick one?
I would probably go Pollard, just because I've been I own him, so I watch a lot of Dallas.
You roster him.
I roster him.
We'll work on that language.
Sorry. He's my number 2 running back on a couple teams. How's that? So I watched Dallas. They just played my Giants on Thanksgiving, so everybody watched it. And he looks so much more explosive than Ezekiel Elliott. And they put him out in the slot every once in a while because apparently he's a darn good wide receiver. And so Ayuk appears to me to be more game script dependent.
That's what I was going to say.
Pollard appears to be the higher floor with the same ceiling.
Yeah, and that's exactly the way I was thinking about it. Higher floor, same ceiling. To me, it's a no-brainer. I go Pollard. I couldn't fault anybody for going Ayuk there. I would not go the others, and Sutton really has been a huge, huge disappointment. Okay, Carlo, back to the Steelers. Agreed, if Pickett is the answer, then the Steelers could have a major turnaround. That's the key. I mean, we know in the NFL it is a quarterback-driven league. If you do not have a good quarterback, your team just falls apart. It's a mess. Then here's another follow-up on that. Rookie QB is also one of the worst situations for a running back. That's absolutely true. Just Bob says, wow, Rocky Blyer. I'm glad that I I got that response. We'll see if I can get even more old school. More old school than Rocky Blyer. I'll have to think about that. Okay, Carlos says debating dropping Sutton just for peace of mind. What do you think, Case?
I've been there. I own Sutton, but it's in Dynasty, so I can't drop him in Dynasty. If I had him in a redraft league, I do think there's a lot of other wide receivers on the waiver wire that you can probably get that you won't feel as tempted to start. So it doesn't hurt when you put him in your lineup and he disappoints you.
I will make one counter argument, which is that his fantasy numbers are down because he's not scoring touchdowns. Now, of course, you could argue, well, there's a reason he's not scoring touchdowns, and that's true. But at the same time, I think he doesn't have the worst numbers in terms of he's getting a lot of targets. It probably depends on your waiver wire, and so I could certainly see cutting him.
Yeah.
But I also could see feeling like you have to stick it out. By the way, Casey, I did want to say, you taking Kenneth Walker over Kenny Pickett, I still think it was the right thing to do, because while I believe in Kenny Pickett, you could have ended up getting nothing for that. Kenneth Walker was obviously going to be a very good pick. So
right.
I think he made the right call.
Thank you.
Speaking of Kenneth Walker, Imal says Kenneth Walker, Najee Harris, Cordarrelle Patterson, or Keenan Allen. So is this for one spot? It looks like that's for one spot.
He said he has to sit one.
Oh, he's got to sit one. Okay, sorry. Thank you for the elaboration there. I missed that for some reason. So sitting one. Well, to me, Kenneth Walker starts no matter what. Let's start there.
Yeah.
I still probably would start Najee Harris.
If he's healthy, you kind of have to.
If he's healthy, you kind of have to.
I would sit, honestly, probably Keenan Allen, just because he hasn't done anything.
I would sit Patterson, but
but Atlanta's going against Pittsburgh, right? Am I right on that?
Don't know about that.
Yes, Atlanta's going against Pittsburgh. So I like Najee Harris in that matchup because Atlanta's defense isn't great. And then who?
Well, so Carlos says Najee might not play. So obviously, if Najee doesn't play,
then it's a no-brainer.
It's a no-brainer. But here's the reason I sit Patterson instead of Keenan Allen. They're both
Just Bob agrees with you, by the way.
Okay, well, we know Just Bob is sharp, so that's a score for me. But here's why, and it's actually similar to what Just Bob just said. Herbert's getting hot. Play Keenan. I think that he is, and nobody's happier to see it than me. I have him in Dynasty and Keeper. So I was kind of feeling like, oh my God, we got to turn this around. We have a super chat. Stephen Drakes pops right up to the top. He says, do I trust Myers and Gabe Davis tonight, or wait and play Pittman or Ayuk?
If I had to pick between those, I would probably play Myers and Ayuk.
Okay, but I think what he's saying is that he's oh, I see. Yes, okay. You're right. He's picking two. He could play them. So you said what, Casey?
I think it's Myers and Ayuk. Gabe Davis has been too hot and cold. Like he'll have 35 points or 5 points, and it doesn't ever seem like there's this steady pace where he's getting 12 to 15 points. If it's a PPR, Myers is still the PPR monster, I think, in New England. So I would trust him. And I just like Ayuk better than Pittman. So I think if I had to rank all three, it would go Myers, Ayuk, Davis, Pittman.
Me, I actually would probably wait for Ayuk on one of those. I don't think I'd wait for Pittman. I don't think there's any reason to wait for Pittman with those other two. So then I'm looking at, well, do I play Myers or Gabe Davis? To me, I actually would probably play Gabe Davis. I don't trust Myers, and I don't trust New England.
Well, I think what you have to, these are the things that have to be considered is, what's his face? Who's the coach? Belichick is famous for taking away your best player. So if they game script entirely to take away Stephon Diggs, who is, let's be honest, he's their best player, does that leave Gabe Davis? But does it also, my fear with Gabe Davis is Isaiah McKenzie is also a very trendy and streaky target. If he gets hot, Gabe Davis is now the third option in the passing game in Buffalo. And that's if Dawson Knox isn't ahead of him. Whereas after Deebo Samuel, it's Ayuk. It really is. And so, and if Deebo's not playing, Ayuk is your number one target. And so that's where I look at Ayuk above them. And Jacoby Myers, same thing. He's their number one target.
Yeah.
and Buffalo's been passed on a lot this year.
I have a feeling Gabe Davis is going to have an explosive night. That's my feeling, but of course, it doesn't matter what we feel. But I would say go with your gut if you feel that. I would start Myers or Davis over Pittman, but I would only start one of them. I think you start Ayuk, and to me, you start Gabe Davis. I just think he has too much explosive potential. We've got another super chat. By the way, if this is something you guys want, you want to pop your comment right up to the top, you got the super chat option. We appreciate the support of the channel, and it goes a long way. So thank you so much to Stephen Drakes for that, and for James Hammer Jr. here as well. Pick 2 flex. D. Pierce, Christian Watson, Pickens, or Garrett Wilson. I like those players.
I'm assuming this is a PPR, James. So I would pick, obviously Pickens, I think, is the top one on there to take. They're going against Atlanta. Pickett likes throwing to him. And this guy, if you watch the catches he makes week in and week out, I think he's going to end up being the top receiver from this rookie class.
Music to my ears, Kasey.
I would probably go with Watson next, only because
it's full PPR, by the way.
Okay. I'd probably go with Watson next because Pierce is a running back. So PPR, he's going to lose out there to begin with. And Watson has been consistently good for the past 5 weeks. Bryce Love is the one who threw him, or Jordan Love. I forget. I'm going to get it wrong every time. Jordan Love is the one who gave him the touchdown, I think, last week. So it's not like even if Rodgers doesn't play, Watson has more upside. Mike White is going to be the quarterback in New York, and he was fun last week, but I'd like to see it more than once. Garrett Wilson is a little more risky to me.
It's interesting. Okay, so Pickens to me is the clear one in a full PPR. I think your point about Pierce is key in PPR. If it was just standard, I would start Pierce and Pickens.
Pierce would be my number 2. Yeah.
And especially against the Browns. Jesus, give me that all day. But Pickens is the number 1 guy. To me, I actually would start Garrett Wilson.
Okay.
I just think he's a target monster. Well, at least he's getting to that level. But there is risk. There's no question. If you start Garrett Wilson, either of the other two could outperform. I mean, look, they could outperform Pickens. We never know what's going to happen in these things.
And the Jets are playing Minnesota, which means it could be a shootout sort of game. And Watson, the Packers are going against the Bears. So,
yep. Okay, we got another question coming in from Joshua Chong Lamasa. He says, League 2, Zeke, Palmer, Pacheco, or Lenny in my flex.
Out of those 4, wow.
That's tough. Who are the Chiefs playing again?
The Chiefs are playing the Browns. I just don't.
The Chiefs aren't playing the Browns.
I mean, the Bengals. I'm sorry. The other. Ohio
I go
team.
Pacheco. Pacheco is my guy.
But a Kansas City running back is just.
I know.
So
I can't believe I'm saying it.
I would probably take Zeke, to be honest.
I take Pacheco for the upside. Pollard caps Zeke, doesn't he?
He does. Yeah, but Andy Reid caps Pacheco, I think. I mean, Josh Palmer is not the worst choice in that crew, but again, I don't know. I would probably lean Zeke just because I think Dallas is more committed to the run than Kansas City, especially against the Browns.
Okay, so I'll make one other point. Some of it's going to depend on, do you need a big score or not? If you need a big score, I think you go Pacheco. I think he has the highest upside. But how are you supposed to gauge that? It's tough. But let's say you're going against the worst team in your league and you just need a low score. Okay, I could see going with Zeke. I still think Pacheco to me has the same. It's not a whole lot more risk to play him, but his ceiling is just so much higher.
Yeah, see, I see this as a low-scoring game. Indianapolis is not an explosive offense, so I don't see Dallas having to air it out. I think it'll be a running back kind of.
That's a good point.
Day. And so I see Zeke he might only get 60 to 65 yards, but I'm willing to, if there was a prop bet on over under a half a touchdown, I'm going to take the over.
So Just Bob did say, well, first of all, he said Ayuk was fire back in the discussion before, but now he says Zeke is having a swan song season. Ride him now. But then he does note he's touchdown
Yeah.
dependent.
And that's what I said. 65 yards and a touchdown would be my pick, but that's 12 points. And if 12 points in your flex is pretty darn good.
All right, James Hammer Jr., thanks again for the contribution, my friend. He says start Etienne with KW3 or put in D. Pierce because of injury. So what do you think, Case?
It depends what time the teams play. If you have to make the Pierce call before Etienne's kickoff, then I might. But what
Etienne
I might
plays
also
at 1.
And what time? What I would prefer to do
They
is,
both play at 1.
Etienne and KW3 are obviously the two best. I don't trust Pierce this week. I mean, I know it's Cleveland, but still, I don't think it's going to be that. I think there's going to be 9 in the box type of thing. I would pick up Jermichael Hasty in the off chance that
Etienne's
Etienne
out.
can't go, because Hasty is a great pass catching back, and he's going against Detroit. I would stack as many Jaguars this week as I could.
Yep. So we're getting some comments that support that. Etienne, if he's healthy, from Carlo. And then Just Bob points out an important point just to keep in mind. We're going to wrap up shortly on this, guys, but Pierce is hitting the rookie wall. This is something you need to look out for, and I think it's especially true in running backs. To me, in wide receivers, it's completely the opposite. This is where we're seeing the rookie wide receivers figure it out. The game is slowing down, and this is where those running backs who are used to playing less games in college are getting hammered. Yeah. Speaking of hammered, James Hammer Jr. picked up Knight because he was only available.
Zonovan Knight, that's somebody you want to talk about.
He is. He was the guy that I promoted as my pickup of the week. I think that the Jets, Michael Carter is dinged up. James Robinson seems to be an afterthought. We know Breece Hall is done for the year. And Zonovan Knight actually was a highly touted running back. You know, running backs, just because they weren't drafted doesn't mean they're going nowhere necessarily. I mean, draft capital matters. But, you know, I think Zonovan Knight has a chance to be very, very useful. So good pickup, James. I like it. Let's see. Just Bob says he's way over touches even in college. But then Joshua has a difference of opinion on this. Not the rookie wall, just a bad offense fall, I feel. That also can be.
Yeah.
And Carlo points out, not Pierce's fault. His team is atrocious. I think Pierce I would say that he has a bright future, but here's why I temper that. He's a running back in the NFL. So yeah. I can't believe how short their
lifespan is.
All right,
one more question at the bottom, then we should.
We're gonna do 2 before we wrap up here. Joshua says team's just loading the box because there's no other threats. I agree. So one last question, and we'll finish up here. Jacob F., thank you for joining us here. Flex Mike Evans, Latavius Murray, or Lazard this week. I'm going Mike Evans on that. It's hard for me to sit Mike Evans. Latavius Murray is tempting to me.
I was going to say it is kind of the age of Latavius, as they like to say right now.
Yeah.
Because they don't.
Well, he was my recommendation last week.
They don't have any other running backs. Who is Denver playing this week? Let me look that up.
He was my recommendation last week, and I couldn't believe I was recommending a 32-year-old running back, but the situation was just right. They had just released Melvin Gordon.
Now they are going against Baltimore, which is a really good run defense. So
Mike Evans.
I would go Mike Evans. Yeah.
Yep. Now Jacob does have a comment on it. Mike Evans had been such a fraud these past couple weeks.
Has been.
It's true.
But that's not his fault. I mean, it's not that he's not open. He's not dropping stuff.
That's right.
It's, but Mike Evans is still the one of that crew who you can count on the most week in and week out.
Well, we say in fantasy a lot, don't get cute. Play your best players. I totally understand. And, go with your gut if you have to, but I think Mike Evans is the clear best player. If Latavius Murray was playing in a better matchup, I'd be more comfortable making that call, but I don't like to live with the regret of knowing that I sat my best player because he looked like a fraud, because it can happen in fantasy football. Yep. All right, guys. Just Bob says, awesome show, guys. Great questions. I hope everyone blows this, kick ass, I think. Thank you so much for watching. I want to thank the people who supported us on Super Chat. That was James Hammer Jr. Everybody. And also Stephen Drakes. Thanks so much, guys. Really appreciate the support. We look forward to seeing you same time next week. That's Thursday, 4:30 p.m. Eastern, 1:30 p.m. Pacific. Kasey, it's a pleasure as always.
Always.
I look forward to doing this again next week.
All right, man.
Thank you, guys. We'll see you next week.